Hello, Bob. I'm just going to put up a parasol. 1 second, please. Let's see now. So, Bob, where is everyone today?
I don't know. I'm just here having breakfast. I will have to leave at 9:15, which is an hour and 15 minutes in.
Right. I saw your email. I think that's a very interesting chart that you started making. So that's all very good. I know that Mark Anderson will not be able to make it today.
Mm-hmm.
He has garden produce things to deal with. It's beautiful, beautiful summer here. We have about 26 degrees Celsius now.
And you are still in Eastern Europe, are you, or back?
Back in London. Yeah, 78 degrees Fahrenheit.
Hmm.
It was 40 when we were in Estonia, 40 degrees here.
Uh-huh.
And for British built houses, which are designed to insulate and not be breathing, that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So that was 104 Fahrenheit. You're a Fahrenheit person because of America, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Well,
yeah.
It looks like it's just you and me today.
Yeah, so far. Brendel often comes late. It's very early for him, of course, just like it is for you. You're on the West Coast as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. San Francisco.
I'm trying to organize venue for our next Future of Text, and it's difficult because we don't have any money, and we never have. We've always relied on the kindness of strangers. So in California, it's been either Google HQ or the Betty and Gordon Moore Foundation. I think you went to that one.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So that was good. Here we've had a few. We've had my university when I was a teacher, my university where I'm a student, and this year we're trying the Royal Society of Arts, which is a great venue, but we have problems reaching the right people. And when we talk to people, I say, "Oh yeah, this is great. Very welcome to do it. £2,000 a day." Like, we'd rather not pay that.
That's rather a large amount.
Yeah, plus food. Hello, Brandel.
Morning.
Just having a moan to Bob about trying to organize Future of Text and how these organizations want money to host us, which is not very cool. We've been doing it for free forever because it's a completely free. There was once one presenter who was promised money by one of my kind of co-organizers, and I was just shock horror. Why did you do that? Anyway, money was raised through one-time sponsor, just the right amount of money given to that person. That person was shocked to get the money. So that was all a bit of a Shakespearean level comedic misunderstandings, i.e. not very funny, but there you go. So obviously we can talk about a lot of things, but one thing I've written down when I was in Estonia is the thinking of now that I'm transitioning from PhD student to real person, of maybe trying to have some sort of a research lab at Southampton on the future of text and VR and AI, because I think those two are becoming more and more inseparable. What do you guys think?
I think research lab, yes. Reading in VR obviously is very important for me. AI is something, well, there are aspects in which AI is a given for knowledge work, you know, having the ability to be able to filter and search, be able to make use of classifiers and categorization. Exactly what people tend to mean by AI, it becomes fuzzier by the day, given the kinds of places people integrated and the kinds of increasingly bombastic claims that people make about the way in which AI is transformative to a given workflow. Because yeah, there are amazing things coming out of the generative adversarial networks and recombinant networks that create things like the DALI and Mid-Journey, the things that people enter a prompt and get out a pretty picture. But I'm not sure who that's for or what it does in terms of it sort of becoming an enduring and beneficial part of a professional person's workflow. So yeah, I think that AI is valuable, but I like the way that Apple does it is it's just jammed into the most mundane of places, and I like that. So if that's what you mean, then yes. But AI can mean so many different things to so many different people. It's hard to tell what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, the thing is, even though it's recorded and public and everything, I've been really depressed for the last few days, like proper full-on depression, because I feel that I'm not really producing anything useful in the world. And, fair enough, we all go through that. But one of the kind of things that bubbles up with something like that is, I just wait for Alan to connect with audio.
Hello, all. Thank you.
Oh, you're there. Good. Yeah, no, I was just saying saying that one of the things that's bubbled up for me is the whole let's project 10 years into the future and then try to look back and think what would we have ignored. And having done the future of text for 10 years, where it's mostly been completely open, just trusting anybody to come in and say anything, the only criteria is that they care about the future of text, has been good for text as text. However, it seems blindingly obvious to me that VR and AI are now two insanely potential tools. And just as Brandel was talking about Alan, there's at least two kinds of AI. The AI of hype and the AI of mundanity. Is that a word? That's
Works for me.
So for instance, speech to text, like when I use Siri on here, it's absolutely insane. It works to degrees that's just astounding. And that's kind of mundane now. Of course, 10 years ago, we would have seen that as being sci-fi almost, right? So
lots of talks on that, but complete the thought you were saying about the future of text in the context of VR and AI. I think you were saying something that was more about policy than.
Yeah, well, what I was saying is I've been a bit depressed over the last few days, like proper depression of, I am useless. Nothing I've ever done is useful, that kind of stuff. We all go through it to different degrees, not to judge anyone specifically, but I'm not embarrassed to say it happens every once in a while, even though it's really boring.
Same here. I'm there with you.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice. So then the question becomes, okay, if I am going to pick myself up and I'm going to continue with this future of text, of course I will. It's a rhetorical question. Then what are the things we have today that if I project myself 10 years into the future, I would have looked back and said, oh, come on, we have this and this. Why didn't we use this and this? Why were we so narrow-minded? I've been narrow-minded on purpose for over 10 years now because hardly anyone focuses on text. So when people said AI before, I've been like, no, I don't want to deal with it because the general perception of AI is press a button, work is done. But now we've gotten to AI, and I use this watch Siri example again and again because the mundane aspect, and this is picking up on Brandel saying, completely agree, is phenomenal. And there's a lot of things that can be used for that. Even like organizing a document alphabetically by index or whatever it might be. Call it machine learning, call it AI, call it statistics, call it whatever you want. So you have that on one side. On the other side, and I'm reading this book that Mark Anderson suggested, You're a Thing and I Love You. It's actually it's quite balanced and very good. I really appreciate issues being highlighted, such as AI has short memory because literally it doesn't have the computational memory to remember long sequences. These are useful things. So that is why I'm considering maybe in my quest of going forward, setting up this, if having, people that are higher up agree, a research lab in Southampton on the future of text and VR and AI. Because VR is the same as AI in the sense that some VR will be just basic AR, put on the glasses, get directions or whatever. Of course it will. That'll be mundane VR. And then on the completely other side of the scale, there will be VR where you feel like you're a whale swimming in an information landscape, psychedelic Jaron Lanier stuff. And in between, there'll be all these incredible things that we now have opportunities to explore in both areas. So I just wanted to air that thought and see the feedback.
Lots of thoughts on that and broader, but I want to open it up to others because, obviously I'm just jumping in like a fly.
You're not jumping in like a fly. If you were a bit arrogant, you might be that, but you're not. You come here when you can, and that's greatly appreciated. There is no rules as to have to be here every time. So
all right, well then I'll dive into what I was going to say.
Dive.
A little backstory. My focus in school was analytic philosophy, and at the time, I learned all about the logical positivism movement and the thinkers there, and came to despise it as much as Plato, I would say, as being not really useful. So around 10 years ago, when ML suddenly broke on the scene again, the NLP and such, the new techniques, I was like, oh, wow, they must have solved those problems. This is exciting. Those problems from the 1920s. And that's why I find machine learning so fascinating and dug into, kept abreast of the technology and finally got a job doing some of it. And found that, no, the problems were never addressed. They were brushed aside. And it's funny because these problems crop up still, like you can brush them aside to a point, but they are present in series autosuggest. They are present in even DALL-E at a certain scale, right? Even though DALL-E is a much more, I would say, mature product framing because it has low stakes, right? And it's explorative, but that's another topic. And so the part of future of text to me that links to VR and to ML is that there are some problems that never go away. They may change their shape, they may be unrecognizable, but like if you could take concepts and sort of give them a new morphology, like an alpha fold of an idea, you'd be able to say, oh, this is related to that, So there might be a way in which or at least one of the struggles with autosuggest comes back down to the struggle of naming things, or the struggle of, do you put a thing as a tag or a category or a directory or a file, right? And those are such simplistic information architecture conflicts that are like out of vogue now, but they still underpin so many of these challenges, right? VR opens the doors up to representation in a more of an ant colony type experience, right? But there's still going to be a lot of those problems may be masked or abstracted away for a time, but we'll get there. We'll inevitably get there. That's what I love so much about Doug Hofstadter and Gödel Escher Bach and that kind of work, and the work of there's a group of researchers. I believe they're identified as ELK. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but I could find it. Where they're looking at how even sentence prompts go wrong with AI, right? So to me, all these things are rather intimately related. but they're related in the my interest in them is that kind of like sub technology perspective, the part where humans and technology still continually clash in their meanings and translations. That was my little blast. I'm done now, but I support the line of reasoning.
Well, as Alan, I haven't seen you in the group, but that's because I don't come all the time either, and so we're overlapping maybe for the first time, or maybe you were in one of the 12 or 15 person groups. I don't know.
Yeah, we've interacted briefly.
But,
I love your work.
And what I always I sit here reframing the future of text as something like the future of thinking, because that's one of the things that we need to continue to work on. And I know that the future of text, emerged out of Doug Engelbart's work, and he was certainly a huge influence on me. But he was more interested in tools and actually trying to make practical the stuff that you could do at the time. And so it seems to me that it's useful, and wherever I can, I try to bring in the notion that we're trying to improve the future of improve thinking now and the future of thinking, because we in many ways, as you know, I've written a whole draft of a book called the Little Book of Future of Wicked Problems and Social Messes. I think we're in a mega messes of all kinds, and we don't know how to think in those terms. And if we're majorly focused on the tools, sometimes the tool will help, sometimes it will it will lead us in the wrong directions.
Absolutely.
Where the tool helped yesterday, that was announced at least by DeepMind, is that that they've solved, at least apparently, the protein folding problem. Now that's a big deal. That is a huge deal in chemistry and in biology.
Yeah, I mean,
I spent a bit of time a couple of years ago asking different expert friends of mine, what is it really hard to do? What are the problems you don't know how to go about doing in your field? And protein folding was one of the things. In fact, somewhere in my hard disk, I tried to summarize how they saw protein folding at the time as an insuperable problem, or as at least a really, really hard problem. And here, yesterday, bingo, done. So a tool, so I'm not opposed to tool, but I'm not at all. But I think that that certain kinds of focus on what we're trying to do, and getting, and for me, the experience has always been the progress that we've made at different times always has to do with both trying to think about the broader picture and then really work on a current problem.
Yeah, I mean, Doug, of course, did talk about a human system tool, integrated tool set. One thing I saw on Facebook today, I think it's hugely relevant, because there has been some questions about kind of what aspects of text we're looking at. So somebody writes about the war in Ukraine, This war is completely staged. It has been negotiated between the countries involved, except the chosen battleground to fulfill their political and economical agendas. Deeply sorry for the civilians who have lost their lives in this horrible theater. Similarly, Roger Waters, who used to be a hero of mine, and back in the 80s, I actually took a picture of him on stage, and it was the first poster I ever sold. He comes out with statements saying that the leaders of both countries are profiting for this, people are suffering, basically equating it. Now, sitting here in Europe, there are two overriding issues. One is climate change, of course, number one, and two is World War III, that's already started to an extent. So when it comes to text, to read that kind of stuff, and every time I try to deal with people who say that, my perspective is always, if the war stops now, Ukraine stops existing. So this whole stop the war thing is really, really damaging. And as I talk to my friends in Norway who agree on this particular issue, Norway, for instance, we should give literally billions in aid now to fight, because otherwise Putin, he will take half of Ukraine, then he'll take all of Ukraine, then he'll take Armenia maybe. China will obviously go in and take their little areas too. It means that the world order will be completely destroyed. How do you have a discussion with someone who has this very basic notion of war is bad? Of course war is bad, but there is a bit more to that. Most of these discussions are text-based. Most of them seem to be via social media. I mean, imagine if we could have like a plugin that some of the murals or knowledge graphs or something could go into. I don't know. I just think it's really basically obscene. The four of us may not agree on every issue, but at least we have enough interpersonal respect to discuss them. So when so we're basically, it's not that different from 1940. And
Well,
there's still a discussion. Sorry, yes, I'm repeating myself.
A quick vibe on that, because a lot of what I am naturally attracted to are the tiny atomic level interactions, the subconscious. But I think that's because that's actually where to get started on those really big problems. The problem that you just expressed is a true problem, right? But it reminds me of the story in the 30s and 40s of the priest who was a popular talk radio personality. I can't remember the priest's name, but he basically was totally anti-Semitic, massively anti-Semitic, made eugenics popular for like almost 50% of the US at one point was a fan of eugenics. And it was also an apologist for Hitler. And the FCC shut him down, right? So there wasn't hey, we need a new kind of radio, we need a new kind of technology. In that case, it was governance to say, look, we're stopping this, right? And that was totally against the freedom of speech. Lincoln did the same thing in the Civil War. He went against the freedom of speech. But those are questions of governance, right? And in those two particular, well, at least in the case of the priest, I would say that was a good call, right? Because there was this rampant spread of information and there needed to be some kind of guidance. So not all these problems can be fixed with a new kind of technology. I get the motivation and I'm there with you 100%. But if that is the motivation, if that is the focus, then it needs to expand beyond what can be built. Yeah, Charles Coughlin, thank you. It needs to extend into ideas of governance and policy.
Right. Well, so I agree that it was important to take Coughlin off the air. I would say that it was also technology that was resulted in that having happened.
Yes,
I think governance structures are technology every bit as much as the networking capabilities that underpin the ability to require the moderation in the first place. I think a lot about what YouTube is. Part of it is that a friend of mine is relatively high up at it, and I don't always know what to say to him about what YouTube is and what its kind of psychic role is for the populace, because on the one hand, it provides this mass of content for people, and in particular, I feel like I'm the better for it in terms of the content that it's been able to connect me with. But you know, it's undeniable that it's radicalized people, and so strange that they're absolutely blithe about the reality that what their technology does those things. It's part of it, and so that governance has to be a central component of understanding what it actually does for people, and a platform absent any kind of governance structures is simply irresponsible. I don't know. Like any, as I've said before, technology is bureaucracy sped up, but bureaucracy is also the thing that gives rise to content moderation policies and the kind of decisions about what it's possible to remove or to expunge any record of. Moreover, you know, these kinds of things, and so yeah, I think that there's a responsibility, but I just flat out reject the sort of techno-solutionist perspective that seems to prevail within Silicon Valley, that those are separate things. I think it's absolutely the same sort of concern.
Yeah, I so strongly agree with you. I pasted in 3 separate pieces because Zoom didn't want to take it as one, of kind of a postscript to my thesis, where I think we're arguing along the lines. But the thing is, what I've noticed that people are really good at something tend to be good at that something and maybe lacking in other areas. Like Doug Engelbart being a genius within his field. There were a lot of other things where he just had no clue. I saw that with my father. It was fantastic in business. Other things he had no clue. So everybody I know who is a politician, including academics who are academic higher up, so to speak, they're very good at politics. They don't understand anything else. Like Wendy Hall, who is the reason I even got to apply for my PhD. Well, she gave me the scholarship and everything, whom I highly respect. Her desktop is the messiest I've ever seen. Her Mac is a complete mess. She doesn't know most of the keyboard shortcut. She is known for being famous within the field of AI. She did massive things in the 80s. Very clever woman, but her main cleverness is politics. It isn't technology. So to have
what name is the person?
Dame Wendy Hall. She's even a dame. Okay. You know, I'm saying this, I'm sure she'll listen to it someday, but saying this with respect, that is her key. That is why she built the departments that she built. And, you know, you look at American politics now, same here in the UK, but since we share the reference of America, you know, so many of the right wingers are basically shutting this down and changing this. And, you know, they go by their feelings, they go by their anger, and they get votes for it. And that's just the reality. Same as a business person will focus on the profit. You know, as long as we understand, let's not even call it motivations, but kind of what drives us. The discussion of techno solutions or politics and so on. I mean, the little bits that I pasted in, it's too much for you to read right now, of course. It's basically saying that, for instance, in me trying to sell the notion of visual meta, you know, my thesis is, first of all, selling the notion of metadata. For people like us, it's completely obvious that when you have more metadata, you can do more useful stuff. But for people in other parts of life, they may not click on that. The second part of visual meta is just that it's easy, you can see it, it's right there. You know, my innovation is tiny. But to even sell the idea that metadata can make things more powerfully connected and useful, it can help our thinking, of course it can. But imagine if I got the support of, let's say, Tim Cook, who is also a politician in this sense, you know, or the higher ups at Google, or even a traditional politician. You know, would they understand the importance of metadata in the way we do to help make it real? Probably not. They probably think of metadata along the lines of surveillance metadata. You know, they have a bad association with it.
How many people? How many people would you guess understand and can use immediately your idea? I mean, I cannot. I'm not. I understand it. Haven't used it. Don't have. You know. Am not. I guess unless the document that I receive have metadata in them, I'm not going to be paying much attention to, or putting metadata on the 10,000 PDFs that I've made.
That's obviously the chicken and the egg problem, and I'll try to answer that in a few different ways. Number one, if any of the PDFs you have has a DOI on the front page, if you use Reader, it will say, do you automatically want to assign visual meta to this? Because it'll check out the DOI, get the metadata, and put it on. So part of it's easy. But of course, even though ACM hypertext last year and this year has visual meta at the back of every document, it's only the minimal amounts. And only my software, the Reader, really uses it. Plus Mark Anderson's database can take them in, obviously. So it's not that useful.
Mm-hmm.
I completely accept that. It's basically just an approach. If publishing houses or other software providers allow you to export with this easy stuff at the end, then it can be useful. And this is partly where I basically get very depressed, because it's so obvious. Whenever I explain to someone what this is, a random friend I haven't seen in forever, I say, I got my PhD. What it is to write metadata at the back of the document so the document knows what it is and can communicate that. I mean, that's the whole entire thing. They instantly get it. But if it doesn't provide them real benefit, why should they help make it a thing, right? So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there the political question? You can disagree. The political question is: are you willing to put the effort into getting Adobe to broadcast this as the greatest new thing for PDF?
I'm trying to do that, and Vince Cerf has been very good at introducing me to Adobe folk, and also to the Google Docs team. But the Google Docs team management keeps changing, and it doesn't seem to be one person's job. It seems to be quite fluid. But yeah, I would absolutely think that would be very, very useful. And the problem is, I'm a political left-winger, more economically right-wing, but quite left-wing. What that means, I'm not very good at organizing. I'm not very good at being angry or proactive. So the whole thing of why should anyone care comes up quickly. It's a deficit with people like me. Even if we think something is obvious, it's not like, this is the best, get this, but you know what I mean. And that's just not very useful. It's quite pathetic, actually. But because of Vince Cerf, I used to use Doug Engelbart's name because he wanted me to. And now I'm using Vince's name, obviously very carefully. But he wants me to. That helps. That helps a lot to get something happening. But the reason
are you giving workshops on the metadata and so forth?
I tried to for a while, and there just wasn't much interest. But I think I'll try to do something.
Well, sometimes personal experience. When I started information mapping, I got 4 or 5 people to the first workshop. In the end, we got a large number of people using it, but it took a lot of focus and energy and repetition and getting it wrong. Marketing names, and I don't know, maybe metadata is the wrong name even, I don't know. But it's a good idea, in my view, it's a good idea and worthy of a considerable amount of energy put into it. So the question is, yes, can you get any kind of well, I'll stop there because that may not be the topic that everybody wants to talk about today. But clearly, governance is one of them, and I was very interested in what Alan was starting.
Yeah, Bob.
I have a thought on that too.
Hang on,
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, just really quickly, because Brandel, being the wordsmith, who came up with my entire marketing campaign for Author last time, which is just really.
What was that?
I'll send you a screen.
A tool for thoughtful writing.
Yeah, okay.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's
I mean, I know
fantastic.
author obviously, but I love that the wordsmithing. And also, Bob, real quick, if you have that law of form, I'd love to read that. Laws of form. Go ahead, Frode.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that spending a few minutes on, hang on, I'm going to send you an image here while I'm talking. When Facebook became Meta, I was a bit stressed because of visual Meta, and went through the whole thing. Should I keep the name or not? And metadata isn't sexy. So even though it is that, and by the way, the definition of metadata, in doing a PhD for many years, I never found one definitive definition of metadata. It really varies from here, there, and everywhere. And during my Viva, one of the advisors or examiners rather questioned whether visual meta is metadata because it is inside the document. Absolutely fair question, right? But considering that so many technological terms, like you said, Brandel, technology is politics sped up. Considering technological terms are very, very vague in some cases, maybe we need to find other terminology.
Yeah.
A quick thought on that. That actually gets right to the heart of what I was going to try to express. I think the tool is very valuable for a paradigm that has not hit yet. When I think of the value of metadata and how it's perplexing or just baffling to a lot of people, the same way that there's a kind of a recent meme about just use Apple Notes. This whole Obsidian Rome stuff is overblown, and very valid point there. And I feel that way about half the time anyway. But I think that what's happening is a paradigm hasn't coalesced. Either it approached, but it never arrived. And what I mean by that is the real revolution in science wasn't just Einstein discovering this relation of space-time. It was that he presented a new way of thinking that was inherently relativistic, and that caught fire into all the other sciences and brought things forward in new ideas. Nazis at the same time were making incredibly sophisticated tanks and weapons, but they rejected any idea of relativism, and so they missed out on the atomic bomb. You've got a paradigm, a way of thinking and doing that. I feel like I explore that space quite a bit with the variety of tools, and so metadata is of particular interest to me, as well as very particular ways of using AI to actually show that there's maybe a totally different way of taking notes, retaining information, etc. That is the opposite of explicit. It's almost baffling. It's almost ADD first, right? And for that to come around, or that's what I would like to see come around, because then I think a lot of this stuff would stop being an uphill battle.
Phenomenally interesting to hear you talk like that, because it's funny. Our brains have things, and information moves in lines. It's not just a cloud. There are processes going on. We talk about stock records. I think groups like we have here is really good for changing the track a little bit, like Mandel did with author. It's not a tool for thought. It is a tool for thoughtful writing. I mean, that is a track change. It's almost nothing, but of course it's everything. So I'm wondering if, I was interviewed not too long ago about, I don't remember what it was, but something about, and one of the ending questions was the future. Do I see it going up or down, worse or better? And my feeling was that the potential to get better is massive, but also worse. The potential goes in both directions. So when you talk about relativisms and Germany and all of that stuff, we are a little bit that today. And I'm held back. I talk about deep literacy. And deep literacy is something that seems to jive with some academics, but people in general don't give a monkeys. What does it do for them? If we can think of a terminology that means, hey, learn to use your tools for thinking. And by the way, we should develop better tools. Is there an angle we as a community can present that to the world where, just like relativity, it changes how they think, and suddenly it's not just about usability, it's not just about the first 30 seconds of using the software, but it's about expanding your mind?
Um, I think yes. I think that people try to do that in the productivity sphere, the influencer, thought leader sphere. But, you know, going back to Einstein, if he had just said, "Hey guys, relativity, what do you think?" It would have died on the vine, right? So that's a nice idea, but we had to see exactly how he was thinking and executing it in a very we saw the depth of his thought in the context of what he meant by that. The word alone is meaningless. It doesn't lead to a change. Seeing this process enacted very specifically is what gives people the interest to dive in and transform their way of thinking, right? To invest into it. So I think it isn't the kind of thing, this isn't what you were saying, obviously, but I don't think the solution will be found in a catchphrase or a framework. I think it's going to have to be something where a group of people, say, for instance, start writing or relating in this different way together, and you see these outsized rewards that come from it. I think it'll start out being a mess, not a marketing a clean package. And I think some of that is starting today, or has been for the last 2 years.
Do you remember the ads from The Economist last 10, 20 years, something like that?
I'd like to know what Alan was suggesting is starting today. Maybe I'm missing it. And maybe you were going to identify it there, Froda, but I'd like to follow up on what he said rather than change the topic again.
Oh, okay. Well, I was speaking sort of kindly of the TFT movement that
The what?
is even
What is that? I don't know.
No, it's when we're talking about Rome research or Obsidian or all of these new tools that are really exciting for people, but wind up being a lot of hype. Or
it's short for tools for thought.
Yes, thank you, Randall.
So, are you familiar with Rome and Obsidian, Bob?
No.
They are largely kind of personal wikis that allow for the very easy creation of new pages and articles, sort of the implicit creation of those and the implicit linkage that flows from being able to use wiki style annotation to be able to put those things together, and some of the other fancy sort of consequences that flow out of that, like the ability to create a map of those related concepts. Is that fair, Alan? Are there any other sort of critical
features?
And
I'll state, add along with that. That is not the paradigm shift that I'm talking about. I think there is a lot of enthusiasm there, but if anything, it's along the lines of Carlota Perez's technological revolutions, right?
Wait a minute, you talk too fast. I don't know whose revolution you're talking about.
Carlota Perez.
Here we go. Okay.
All right. Who's the author?
Carlota Perez. Carolca.
Carlota, yeah. All right. Carlota Perez. And it's technological. All right.
Right. So it's not the if you downloaded Rome or any of these species of tools, your mind probably wouldn't be blown because you're familiar with a lot of the ideas. It's really the democratization of what you can do in a terminal, a command line, or a code editor. It feels like you can now, like the big invention was that you can do the kinds of things that you could do with code a little bit more with text. And so people flipped out, and to reduce that down, the big takeaway was, oh, my information doesn't have to be in documents and folders, right? So when I'm talking about the thing that's been going on for the last 2 years, I mean that people are starting to deconstruct, decouple the way we've been writing for the last, say, 40 years as being document bound, and they're saying, oh, I can still write in this smaller way, and there's a a sense that I can still retrieve it. This is interesting. What else can be done? Right. Which, so that's what I was referring to. It's leading to some interesting stuff. It's leading to a lot of blind alleys, but it's promising that that conversation is happening. I've talked for a long time, so I will.
Can we follow on that? I think, for me at least, I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
Is there a community of people doing that? Apparently, yes. At least there are 2 software programs, and are there and do these apps, or whatever we want to call them, enable teams to work together in that way?
In theory,
is it an individual wiki, thing, personal wiki?
it is designed with collaboration in mind. It doesn't have to be fundamentally collaborative. For the most case, it is for personal knowledge management. I'd say 90%, but there are teams that are starting to use it, try it out. But that hits some hard, some limits of that the technology often isn't mature enough.
Okay. So it
I'm
starts off
mainly to enterprise environments.
For what drives? I was talking
in enterprise settings. Unfortunately, the enterprise tools still rule the roost.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to hijack the conversation though about all this. This is just
This is not a hijack. This is the direction the plane was going originally.
Yeah, no, I see this as relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, from my perspective inside big companies, we use wikis of various forms. And so there's one that was purchased by Microsoft after we sort of first inked the deal for it, and we use it, and it does a job. It's kind of more related to being page centric and having a implicitly hierarchical tree view of where all of the documents fit. And then we have one that has the ability for, but does cross-linking relatively well, does search really well. Then we have another one which is more implicitly sort of a bundle of documents, a pile of documents that technically also have universal links, but is more like a set of documents than it is a wiki. And yeah, it's interesting to see sort of practically and culturally within even a company what people tend to do with each, and how the sort of the form of the information shifts as a consequence of those priorities.
So
I'd like something.
I would love to hear more about that, your experience with it, because that's what I live in, and I think it's like the silent killer of enterprise and productivity. That there's like a SOFON, there's a fundamental limit of complexity, like a limit to growth or scale, whatever that study was in the 70s. The documentation problem at the level of sophistication of or governance or whatever for enterprise documents have been ignored for so long that I think it's fundamentally, I don't know, moved progress to a turtle's pace, a snail's pace, in my experience.
Yeah, it is interesting. The discoverability aspect of information is pretty challenging. A lot of people, people have very different appetites for reading, which means that some people see something that a scroll bar indicative of something being sort of 3 or 4 screens worth of text long, and they'll throw up their hands in disgust at the necessity to do such long form reading in comparison to what they're used to. And then there are people who write very, very large documents of 50 screens worth, and will swear black and blue that the information is in there, you just have to read it. I don't bother writing much in the way of documentation for the most part, because for the most part I don't believe that I'll be able to capture the essence of what is important for somebody else to understand until I know where they're getting at things from. And so I tend to write to them in a chat and we now have
That's
Slack.
well, that's
and,
exactly what I mean. Yes.
Right. And we actually now have
Well-
Slack, and so I just moved over to this new role inside the technology development group, and one of the first things I did was read through the last 2.5 years of the chat logs of some of the development teams, which was a slog. They
Oh.
have been using it extensively. But it was really, really phenomenal. Again, that's something that very, very few people will have the appetite for, and perhaps should have the appetite for. But it was really interesting in terms of the ability to get at what were the sort of concerns of the day, of the week, and see how those ebbed and flowed and changed on people's specific personalities in response to how those things sort of came and went as issues occupying their minds.
That
So yeah,
sounds like
it's
a
interesting. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that sounds like a phenomenally useful area to augment the reading of long chat logs.
Well, and this is the to Brendel's point. Yeah, like Slack in its weird way, again, not an innovation in the same way that Twitter wasn't really an innovation as much as it was a reframing. But it has done more for the productivity of enterprise, I think, than scores of other tools. And it's entirely, for the most part, unstructured, or sometimes the structure gets in the way. But what it retains, what it brings back to the forefront, is the idea of the dialectic, the sense of someone asks a question, and I get literally my whole day is like that, going through Slack. Like someone asks a question about how to do long code SMS in New Zealand, right? In this one particular arrangement. And I know 2 parts of it, but I don't know this third part. So then I go around searching for this other third part. And eventually I stumbled onto a conversation between 2 folks that happened like 3 years ago. And from there, I can extrapolate some kind of direction, And that doesn't exist in documents alone when they're divorced and formalized. It has to be in that, in like the environment that we're doing now,
Right. It reminds me a lot of the absolute watershed moment for me of some of the initial fanfare for Google Wave. Do you recall Google Wave, Bob? Is that something that
Nope.
sort of popped up on?
Nope.
It was a technology that Google announced in about 08, 09, around there, and the central conceit was there is no technical difference in practice between the technology that underpins chat, that underpins emails, and underpins documents. So why not have one technical platform that serves all of them simultaneously? Have documents that you chat in, and it was revolutionary. And I want to go back and watch some of those presentations. Yeah.
You probably already know about this, but if not, I can get you in. One of the product managers for Google Wave has created a new product that's from his own sort of EMAC thing that he's personally for years. Now it is a new EFT. It's still it's not been released yet, but they are looking for alpha users. I just got onboarded last week. It's very cool. It's called Kana, CANA, and cool. It's an expansion. It is such a relief from the ceilings that I was hitting with Rome. The very basic problems that were just solvable because of a kind of naive approach, naive approach. This is far better in those regards. I'm still kind of kicking the tires, but he would be that team would be great to reach out to too and discuss what they detected as the problems and how they are implementing these solutions. It's not Wave, but it's exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah. So to the story, Wave was spectacular failure in terms of popular uptake. I'm not sure how much it was supported within Google, but it was the first. It was, from my mind, the beginning of the end of my confidence in their support for continuing to buttress shaky ideas or amazing ideas with a shaky start into a market. That Google routinely kills things if they don't see them as being promising, and partly that because people don't understand them. Yeah, nobody knew what to do with this tool when it wasn't an email and when it wasn't a chat app and when it wasn't a document app. All of these sort of possibilities lingering inside every single document that they insisted on calling waves meant that people were, I don't know, my sense of it was that people felt that the functionality was haunted because it could pop into these different modalities at any moment. And it was funny, but ultimately I couldn't personally come up with anything to do with it, and ended up having to revert to all of these different modalities. Technically, I believe that it was very useful in being the first proving ground for a number of the technologies that ultimately became exceptionally valuable within Google Docs. Other places will have things like conflict-resistant data types, or CRDTs, I think they're called.
Yeah, CRDTs.
And so it, from a technical perspective, it was a success. But in terms of the framing of what a product is, what these different modalities, your memos, your essays, Bob, the sort of uncanny valley between them all was just vastly too much for anybody to cope with. It was really fun to look at and reflect on.
That's great that you yeah, that maybe that's a topic, Frodo. I think that a lot of times I assume that that's that most of the people in the group come from or at least adjacent to the whole tools for thought bonanza, gold rush. It might be a good topic for a monthly to review it in a with a sense of scale, some more history that ties into it, a wave, workflowy, even it's it's based in Lisp in some ways. Some of the tools come from that culture. Could be an interesting thing to dig into. History of TFTs and where they're at now and what they're missing, where they should go. Your tool is technically a TFT, whether you like it or not. Or I say technically, it's not a technical term, obviously. In fact, I don't even like the term tools for thought, Bob. It's so vague. I've been using the term for these in my own tools as calling them inactive interfaces. Active, meaning there are casual interfaces, passive interfaces, active interfaces, and these are varieties of inactive interfaces, right? So that you put something in and you expect to get something back, that you have this dialogue capacity, even if it's with another version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Opposed to Apple Notes, it's much more passive, right? And like maybe actually it is because you're still using it to think. Sorry, a passive one would be like looking at Yelp or getting food from a food delivery app, right? Where you're just filling out information. Anyway, it's a topic for another time.
Yes, and I think it's a very good topic for another time. And I think you just written yourself into making a presentation on that topic.
Fair enough.
I just wanted to highlight this little thing because when you're talking about even author being a tool for thought. So here's the little bit that I sent you guys earlier about governance. But as I've told you a billion times, you know about the defined concept. You can find them from the text. There's also a menu, and you know now that you can click inside, including examples like this. But what I wanted to show you, which I think is very relevant to this discussion, is this. When this is my thesis document, obviously quite long, all kinds of nonsense in here, but there is actually you don't have to find it in here. You can actually go into a menu that says define concepts. So everything that I have defined is listed here. So we find my name again, for instance. So now at the top of the screen, you get that definition. So we talked about Wendy Hall. You can now see she is my supervisor. Click on her name. And then as all that's relevant for me in this document about her is listed. And I can click on these other people. And you see this list is very small. It keeps referring to these different things. So hang on. In terms of, everything is connected is an easy sentence to say. But question is obviously, when are certain connections more relevant than others, right? So when you're going, like we talked about, going through a massive chat log like Brandel has just done, I guess being able to reform how that looks as compared to comparing with external information would be useful. So maybe for a chat log, you could also have a kind of a glossary. So when you do a find command in there, it'll say, this is where it is. However, these are the people who use this term the most often, and there are examples of how they used it. It's just, yeah, especially if you can make it yourself. By the way,
Go ahead.
no, I was just briefly going to say, if you haven't seen that YouTube that I linked to, the Apple ad, you really have to see it. It's 1 minute long, and it's so inspirational and so beautiful. But of course, most people don't give a monkeys about that kind of a message.
I haven't seen it.
Why should I look around for it and look at it?
Oh, the ad that I've linked to in YouTube in the chat, you mean?
That's what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Well, if you click on it and watch it, it's just incredibly beautiful and incredibly aspirational. And I don't think we use that kind of language anymore. And I really think it kind of
So the topic you're suggesting that we go to now is beautiful and inspirational language. Is that what we're changing the flow of this conversation to?
I don't mean to change the flow of the conversation, but I think in terms of the language we've been talking about, that we have to try to find something new to widen the circle, because that kind of language doesn't seem to appeal to people outside of our group. You don't have to click on it now at all. It's just that we talk about it's just I don't know if you guys feel the same, but for me it's so self-evident that the medium through which we can communicate and think changes the opportunities for how we can communicate and think, and therefore it's important. It's such a primal thing, but it just doesn't seem to light a lot of fires. Yeah.
Go ahead, Brenda. You were going to say something earlier.
So I just pasted it in the transcript of the YouTube video. One of the challenges that I think is related to visual meta, I think is important, is in the context of the Slack spelunking that I was doing. Cave diving, not a technical term of art related to it. Is that Slack is an application that is owned, and the presentation of the information within it is opinionated, related to the expected use of it and the constraints that are put around it. I'm not aware of the API access, for example, that I would have to be able to get all of the information that's relevant about who said something and when, in a format that would be valuable. A lot of the time when I see things like that on the internet, I have to resort to scraping. The process whereby you take the ostensibly human readable components of the information and you try to imbue it with the semantically relevant aspects of it on the basis of, say, the order of the having in a chat log, you'll frequently have the name, the timestamp, and the message content, name, timestamp, message content. And if you can split and parse it in that way, then you can kind of rehydrate it with the meta information, the metadata that that's supposed to be relevant for the purposes of being able to structure it anyway beyond the specific opinion that the application has had for it. And that's really challenging. It means that if that view is adequate, then that's awesome. But if it's not, then it isn't. I remember we were talking a while ago just at the beginning of this sort of COVID lockdown at work about some of the things that would be useful to do with WebEx, which is the Cisco product that we use in place of Zoom. And I said it would be really neat to be able to actually assess the flow of conversations and how much people dominate them, because if equity conversations are important and valuable in our world, then being able to kind of have like a high level audit of like how much men speak versus women speak based on the relative membership in a group versus the relative seniority and the expected norms. That just having that, it would actually be easier to do that kind of audit within the context of a digitally mediated conversation platform than it would be in the room. You'd need to have sociologists having the ability to kind of start a stopwatch and do that, but the computer will be able to do that all for us. But it was so far out of the realm of what people believe that the application is for that they were a little horrified that I might make a suggestion of like, what are you worried about? And like, no, it's not that. It's just, I think that in a context where these factors are stated to matter to us, it would be interesting to have the basis on which to reason about those things. And yeah, so it's visual meta is really useful insofar as it's an API-less API, something that has the ability to give people a more flexible capacity to make use of data onward from the point where it was presented. Yeah, so I like that, and thinking about what I would have been able to do with my because even now like the way that most browsers and Slack and things like that work is that despite the fact that it was many tens of thousands of lines of discussion, there wouldn't be a way to sort of simply grab it off the page and copy paste it, because those things tend to be view constrained such that you only get the number of document nodes that are necessary to show it on screen. The computer at some level knows about it. The programmers who were tasked with presenting all of that stuff at the right time have successfully done that. And so far as I scroll to here and I get that, I scroll to here and I get that. But the extent to which those things have been exposed in a way that I can grab them for other broader purposes is strictly limited. And yeah, it's frustrating and a shame, because it means that I haven't had the ability or opportunity to think about what sort of transpositions, what transmutations I would be appropriate to be able to kind of take that, not just that document, but my reading of that document as a distinct artifact as well, and then go like, what is it other than taking notes, which entails copy pasting pieces out of it, and my having to know and remember the provenance of each individual piece of it. So yeah, sort of stripping every piece of it of its context along the way. And it would be nice to imagine a better way of going about that.
I have a diversion, but I don't want to interrupt. But if you'd humor a thing, something of what you just said reminded me of something that fascinated me terribly last weekend. I'd like to talk about it, see what you think. It may be, it's a distraction in one sense, but it could also be a project. But at the very least,
get on with it.
All right. Okay. So
I just want to remind you that I mentioned to Froda before that I have to leave at 9:15, so I'm in about 3 or 4 minutes. So go ahead, but I'll be going.
I'll aim this for you then, because I think you might like this a lot. Possibly, it might even be a thing that Adam would like. What I was thinking about was, or the thing that popped in my mind, maybe it was daydreaming, was reading an article, but also playing a video game at the same time. That was the article. And how this would be possible is you would get to a certain kind of article that is your main points. But if you're like me, when I'm writing, I'll have dialectic in my head, and I'll be writing this, but then something will pop up that would contra whatever I was writing. And so I want to take note of that, right? So that pops up over here. To get to the point, you read this article and you have this little spelunker character. Imagine him as an 8-bit character on a perch at the top of the article that would jump down and sort of jump along with you as you're reading. But then you could also control and say, like, jump over to an island that is a side thought, but somehow connected to, it's spatially placed. And so now you're over in this island, and you can even dig in between the lines of the words to find something. But it's such a goofy idea, but it would turn things that are totally frictionless right now, like highlighting, and actually make them take some effort, which would in turn change how you're reading, because now you're like playing a game like Minecraft, but it's words that you're working through. And then you would have these little abilities, like you could hit with a hammer on the paragraph to compress it down into a node, or similarly explode it out, like in that demo, that VR demo. That apologies, I didn't see that demo, but you could explode it out. And now, if you're going down this cavern, jumping around, and you've exploded something, the cavern sort of twists sideways, and now you're back into a cave inside that tunnel. Anyway, I won't go on, but why that idea appeals to me is that it's a forced example of, rather than productizing and saying we're going to be more productive and we're going to, here's a tool for thought, or here's an integration with Slack. It's saying, wait, let's turn it into a game and explore the space. Maybe there are different ways to read and different ways to take notes, but we have to treat it as play. We have to go a little slower. We have to try out this novelty, and then maybe you even, as the spelunker, take concepts and stuff it in your bag, and now you have something later on. Anyway, that's the short of it. I can go
Nice
into
idea. I like it.
I thought you would.
I think that would be fun, and it may lead us in a lot of directions, which we and it would be something that would be relevant to our exploration of virtual reality. That is, having such a critter in virtual reality would be really interesting.
100%. It's exactly an exploration of going from 2D to 3D.
Yeah.
It would be a different interface in VR, but it would still reduce, like it would start out as almost an 8-bit game.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out all the stuff, but it definitely hit me with a storm last weekend of what would be possible. There's a lot of rich possibilities in it.
Well, you could have a bunch of functionalities that you could choose to put in it at different times.
Right. Yeah. You're rather than beating a level, you're just reading various articles, but after you get to a certain point, you be given different abilities, right? Like scaffolding is like an outline format. So you could scaffold some of these parts and push things in, versus throwing a web, and saying, here's a loose connection, Yeah.
Good idea. Sorry, I got to leave, folks.
Sure. Bye.
See you later, Bob. Just to say the obvious, yes, good idea. Yes, I like it. But also the obvious, this really comes down to how much metadata you have available. And so if we think along the lines of this and that together, infrastructure plus structure, capability, that would be very useful. Like like Brandel's Slack example or something like that. I mean, imagine making I like the idea of my computer spying on me for me, right? So there's nothing wrong with, when I read a text message to someone, I should be able, just a normal iMessage text message, I should be able to expand that into my calendar and to see, have I emailed that person that day? How hot was it that day? These are all factors that can help me. It almost doesn't matter what it is. Anyway, that's just my usual rants. Yes, we need the interactions, but I've done a PhD. Oh no, it's all about the infrastructure right now.
thing that was interesting about the toy example, the Spelunker idea, is that it would be saying, we're not going to give everyone tools to make their own caves and caverns or corpus. You know, it's like, here's a toy example that could be prolific, could be another article or corpus every week or every month, right? But it would be like, but we're setting this up for you to show you how you can, you know, this is our cavern. You can make things and change things around for your own use, you know, but it's more like, here's this different way of thinking. And then it may not be ready for prime time in the sense of being a tool for thought, but if it was just an explainer of like, here's what's possible, this is why this kind of thing is valuable, it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I actually do a lot of listening to talks while playing Minecraft, and so I listen to a lot of Ivan and Bert Sutherland down in a particular part of a cave, hollowing it out for various nonsense reasons. And unfortunately, the sound isn't in there, and I think I've given away the computer that I did it on. But I have a relatively sort of acute memory, not of the picture of it because I don't see in my memory, but of the space that I was in as these particular sort of concepts and discussions were in play. And I've often thought it would be great to retain the sound or the time code or some combination thereof in places, as well as to be able to do that specifically for the real world as well. So if I walked in a place and I said stuff, having the ability to see that those files sort of not just geotagged with an instantaneous point, because you know a photograph is often instantaneous, but a spoken message is smeared over a period of time, and for those geotags to pertain to the totality of the recording time. And so yeah, I agree that I think that aspects of that sort of navigational sort of story would be really cool to encode alongside it.
I agree with a few provisos. I had a huge argument with my best friend today. It was based on text message argument first. You know, when you have an argument, you will say bad things. Some of them you mean, some of them you don't. But to be able to pull it out later, I think is really, really bad. I think the nature of any close friendship is you will say some shit. And if the other person is allowed to forget it, that's really, really important. So that's not at all against what you're saying. It's more about...
No, it's right at the heart of it, actually, which is why I would think it would only want to work within an artificial environment where those kinds of things could be controlled. It's not saying this is the way of the future, but it's saying here are these avenues to explore, right?
Oh, yeah. So that's what's really, really interesting here is that when you're in a work environment, this should be absolutely on. But also, even in a work environment, you should be able to turn it off or go into some mode, you know, like Robert's Rules of Orders and all these things. And what is that thing where what is said in the room stays in the room, all of that stuff. But, you know, in a corporate environment, you should be able to do something like, okay, stop recording. And what that means is it's still recording, but it won't be available for another 10 years unless there's some kind of major issue. Because there are...
You bring up a really interesting point there. There's more there because I am guilty of recording pretty much every interaction, every data point I have at work, not for legislation or not, you know, not to sue people, right? But it's so that I know at times I can go back and get this context that even though I took notes of this part, later on I might find that I chose the wrong thing to take a note of. So always on, there's something else that needs to change because it's not even good enough to say this is still being recorded, but it won't have access till 10 years later. There's a lot more going on there. So good point.
Yeah, I
Brent?
think that
Go ahead.
That stems from the fact that I do the same thing in a sense, but just because I've got a pretty good memory. And so a lot of people waver alternate between being impressed and sometimes being a little bit maybe concerned, worried about practical consequences of my having a firmer growth and retention and everything that they've ever said and everything, all of the interactions. It's not because my memory is perfect, but because it's a little better and I have a much better ability to kind of rehydrate, essentially, to be able to kind of get back to all the cues that give rise to being able to kind of reproduce what it is. You know, that notion that that memory is an inactive process, like you're saying, inactive tools. Yeah, like one of the sort of crucial issues we have with all of our systems at present is that there are attendant characteristics of the media as we have used them that are sort of or inadvertent characteristics of them that once we have the ability to change the medium, we are suddenly confronted with the realization that those things no longer obtain. So, you know, speech is evanescent when it's in a room, unless somebody has a recording device, and the circumstances under which they do that tend to be either very special or very suspicious. Either way, they're very rare. You know, so we don't have the ability to obtain most speech most of the time. Whereas with text, you do, but in various forms of textual communication, like emails, they're not universally searchable. Obviously, within a big corporate environment, they actually are, if there are sort of reasons of necessary legal discovery or other suspicious circumstances. Again, though, that's relatively rare. Whereas in Slack, you know, if something happens in a channel and people have access to the channel, then that changes the calculus immediately and immensely. And you know, a lot of the ways in which people interact are not sort of are not tailored to those realizations and that recognition. And you can see that easily in Twitter as well, in the sense that all tweets, unless somebody takes their account protected, are public. And it's an on or off thing for all tweets at that point. And you know, that has some consequence. I don't know that we have a good enough frame of reference for enumerating what are the characteristics of the different media that we have available to us to be able to talk about what kinds of vigilance people need to have, what ways we would expect those pieces of communication to evolve as a consequence of the medium that they're sort of delivered through. But yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, that is fantastic. That similar, well, sort of related, but primarily not. Going back to the Minecraft and what you were doing, listening to Ivan Sutherland playing Minecraft, reminded me of other thing I've been working on my own is kind of pinning down what are the principles, what could be the principles of the ways that we might even be using tools today and not realizing, right? And some of this does depend on the kind of mind that is using it and for what end, you know, and how stable or unstable the environment is, or how harried and fractured a person's you know, priority multitasking is. But one of the things that I do or about to that point is, you know, when you have a stable environment, one thing I like to do when I have an environment is to remember and compress meanings by associating whatever I've come across at that day. I'll give you an example. I just read something from Death's End, which was part of the Three Body Problem trilogy, right? And they're explaining how the world would have to take into account how life has shaped the world, right? All right, so that's a tremendous idea. And but in my brain works, you know, the example in there is ants. So now I'm thinking about this video I saw of a liquid aluminum poured into an colony that created this beautiful 3D structure, while also killing all of the ants. And that led to thinking about Kowloon, the walled city, which led to thinking about the line than Saudi Arabia concept, which is a lot like the spelunking article, but put vertical, right? In the sense that it's a city that you're jumping through. So my mind's making all of these weird associations. If I have a way to just bundle those together, historically, it's far easier for me to find any one of those parts because I've just made this nameless cluster of associations and said this is a thing now. And so I find that it's not formal, it's not exactly categories or tags, but it's this free form. It's embracing that consensitivity, that sort of synesthesia sort of esque way of thinking, and saying, this could actually be a path forward for navigation. Anyway.
Muted. You had I'm not sure if you disappeared for a second.
I hope you're feeling better, Frodo.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to suddenly multiple neighbors started making multiple loud sounds.
Do you know?
This is not very good.
Or shape that AlphaFold makes?
I'm not very familiar with AlphaFold. Yes. I think he's heading back indoors because he had neighbors making sounds. No, I'm not familiar with sort of the characteristics of protein folding. It's not something that I've dug into before. But it is wonderful. Yeah. I'll have to look up that press release.
I was trying to describe. I'm looking for a term more abstracted than that, but like, you're familiar with the term noosphere, right, for ideas? And I was thinking something like, well, neomorphology to explain what I was talking about, but I was hoping that there was a real word for it. To be the sort of like, here's the shape of an idea, but here's its ancestry, its shape, its morphology. If you got the morphology of an idea, you could maybe trace it back to its ancestry. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me that understanding the axes upon which it's evaluated matters just as much as its morphology, because that's this is the sense in which it's rendered in. But I think that you could come up with a way of framing that to accommodate both.
Interesting.
You had a piece of author open, Frodo?
I did. I just wanted to, on the discussion of our record, so to speak. So this is the magical bit where I do Command J and my journal opens. And my journal is just, as you know, a normal document, but I use it for scraps and whatever. I'm still experimenting, but here is a chat from Mapping the Unknowns chat that we had the other day. So all I've done is copy the chat and put it in here. I'm not actually sure why. And then I have an email to Bruce. Sometimes I write my emails here now and then paste it into an email and send it, so that I have, if I think it's important, I have it here, right? But I'm wondering, it couldn't be that hard to have some sort of a plugin architecture where when I upload the call we have now, an automatic transcription of that is copied into my journal for that time. Maybe uneditable, maybe editable, maybe in a different font, whatever it might be. Because the fact that I can fold it so easily, it makes it much more, it makes it really accessible.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I've never used it myself, but something that I was pleased with was in the advent of NoSQL. If you've ever worked with SQL, I studied databases in undergrad. They're phenomenal. They're incredible technologies, but what they hinge on is the robustness of a schema, that you have a particular representation and that you don't deviate from it. NoSQL is sort of the promise that you can throw whatever messy junk you have into a place about a thing, and we'll be able to come up with some kind of query to pull it back and make sense of it. And I really like that, because I think that while it is possible to impose a schema, it's it's valuable to have the ability to store junk and to be able to get to it, because there's a lot more junk than there is sort of formatable stuff. And so I love the idea of being able to kind of create folders and nestings that do have the ability to be absolutely disordered within the sort of the last step of it all. And I think I also like having a disregard for the specific format that those things are. So right now what you have there is foldable, collapsible directories of text. Directory in the sense of a phone directory than necessarily the file folder structures that we're familiar with on the computer. But yeah, having and so you have the transcript of the text, but of the video, but having the video itself sort of just in there as well would be neat. And you can have a YouTube link to it, and the extent to which the link is the video itself is something that you could kind of play with. But yeah, I love it. I love having the ability to kind of relate those things thematically and temporally in a way that makes them retains the ability and the opportunity to draw some of those references a little better than having to be able to kind of call on the powers of your memory to be able to make those connections weeks, months, or decades down the track.
Yeah, and if we're looking at augmenting people like ourselves, one of the things I think we all cherish is to be proven wrong, because that's the only time when we learn, right? Unlike some people who hold on to whatever dogma is simple. And this is a great way to do that. It's like, hang on, I really said that 6 months ago. Wow, that's amazing. You make your new position clear because you have access to it. If it was a throwaway statement, it may not be there. You don't see your own growth. And if you don't see your own growth, you don't see your own trajectory, because we don't grow upwards, we grow in different things, right? So yeah, good to track. Maybe we should do some kind of a movement to track intellectual exercise, not just close the ring on your Apple Watch for how much you've been thinking about this today. Not just standing up.
I would love just close the ring on your Apple Watch for how much you've been thinking about it today. I think I'll take that. I agree. I would like more, but we don't have that yet, and that would be awesome. Because we have mindful minutes, but
but something about that. There's something that's so pathology of technology about that it's we assume that these kinds of things are good and helpful, even though Apple Watch as it currently is vanity metrics for me, because I know it doesn't come close to the kind of activity, or doesn't represent closely the activity that I do, right? So even in the comparatively simple realm of physical stats, it's still just this kind of, the best it can be is entertainment. And it makes me think of the examples to the opposite, which I think are beautiful. Ian Bogost wrote an article in 2017 about a toaster that he fell in love with. And he fell in love with this toaster specifically because it had a button on it that said a little bit more. So rather than a scale or anything like that, it was this understanding, this human understanding, like, oh, it's not quite toasted enough, but I don't want to reset it. I just want give it just a little touch more, right? Which to my mind is similar to that brilliant evolution in status updates when they invented it's complicated as a relationship status, right? Like they embraced the abstractness. You don't see that in technology nearly enough, I think. Anyway.
I think that's quite beautiful. That's kind of a toaster button. But when it comes to these rings, I don't like it because the stand-up one, I'm pretty good at standing up. I find that one particularly patronizing. However, the walking is really, really useful. Sometimes it pushes me just a little bit further. I'm easily clearing 10,000 steps a day, which is kind of a goal. But it really depends on what people want to measure and how they care. I'm sure there's a lot of psychology at Apple around that kind of health aspect of things. But imagine if we could have it also for, rings for thinking, Because the beautiful ones, the meditation, the 5 minutes, I do that quite a lot, and it really helps settle part of what I am without doing full meditation. So I appreciate that. But the one saying, talk about things you're grateful for, it's like, come on, that's patronizing. So I guess we all have different ideas of what's patronizing and what's helpful. But imagine if there is one that says, what are your cherished ideas and how are you going to question them today, right? That could be interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I the thing that I struggle with those is not so much how patronizing the prompts are, is the reliability, how guaranteed it is that the system has the ability to keep me honest about it. And so that's the thing I struggle with Breathe and mindful minutes and that kind of stuff, is that it requires such an enormous amount of good faith on the part of the person doing it that there's no the system and the way that it presents those prompts doesn't have the ability to withstand people not taking it seriously and be like, come on, you got to do this right. If it's going to work at all, then you got to do this. In the same way that if you were to go to I haven't been to a therapist, but like they know when you're not taking it seriously, and they know what to try to push on in order to be able to be like, this is valuable to you. This is an important thing to try. And so, yeah, like that I always get that feeling when a technical system oversteps its capacity to practically assess the quality of its functioning in a given context.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that really, gets to me, is because I would love the thinking stuff, but I would really, and this is why like I despise board games, because they have no critical capacity to make assessments about how well I'm playing. I need to be the rule keeper as well as the person doing the gaming, and so I cannot tolerate them for that reason. Also, my mother doesn't know how to follow rules, and so maybe that was part of it. But so she just can't keep the actual rules of the game in her head. But yeah, so the result is that I like video games, or have in the past, especially because I can play them and explore and experiment without having to be my own rule keeper about like, this is a valid activity within the context of this formalism, and this is not, and in the mindfulness and those other things, I don't get to do the explore and experiment part because I have to be my own rule keeper.
That's a really fantastically interesting thing. Let's stay on that. So a few weeks ago, when I was questioning months ago, why couldn't I do a certain specific rewriting of my thesis? Because I'm not a complete idiot, but I just couldn't. But yet, even though I'm tired, I can play my video game. And I, at the time, said it's what I could reach, the affordances. But you're right. It's also, if I take a bit of text here and move it over there in my thesis, I can do that. Whether it becomes a garble or not, the program doesn't care. But if I try to shoot a wall, the program will say, no, sorry, you can keep shooting, but you're not going to hit anybody. The rule keeping thing is really, really interesting. Do you have further thoughts on how rule keeping within knowledge work may actually be useful as a scaffolding rather than as a constraint?
I do.
So
Go
yes,
ahead, Randall.
one of the things that I like about the video game SimCity and the video games like Civilization is that they have advisors, but those advisors are often in conflict. I think one of the things that you can create is heuristics and a multiplicity of heuristics, and expose those heuristics and their conflicts as mechanisms to be able to support an evaluation for you about what you're doing. So, I love in principle the idea of Hemingway app or Hemming writer, those things that sort of pull excessive verbiage out of your speech or your writing. But I would love for somebody to write more of them. Like what is something that pulls your text into something that's more Dickensian, or Druckerian, because I like that guy, or wrong, and not only so having the ability to make assessments about that. And I think you could do some modification of hidden Markov models as a mechanism for being able to make an assessment of this versus that. You could use generative adversarial networks to figure out how to hallucinate modifications and permutations. And so in that regard, I'm all in, all guns blazing on AI and writing. But I think that, like, what are the moment-to-moment decisions that you need to have about it? And so to that end, like to excising this and putting it there, one of the things that you might be able to do there is to be like, well, does this change its assessment of not whether it's better or worse text, but does it read more like this or more like that? Are there dimensions, axes along which we can, like I said before, Alan, like the shape of an idea, what matters as much as the shape in a specific coordinate space is defining the coordinate space in the first place. Like, are there coordinate spaces that you can evaluate your text upon along that you can then kind of see, is it more or less along these, which are multivariate enough that it's not better, worse, that the reduction of those things into like, there's a red squiggly line under this word is frustrating, and it belies the fluidity of like, well, this isn't actually in the top 1,000 words in English, and you haven't used those in a while, so maybe you think about referring to a more common lexicon. Like being able to see the actual like rarity of words in your corpus, I think would be pretty interesting to be like, this is basic as fuck, or one gets that impression actually by reading things like Dr. Seuss. You read The Cat in the Hat and you're like, oh my God, he hasn't used anything out of the top 100. This is amazing. But it takes a particular level of aptitude with English language in order to be able to recognize what he's doing and not doing it. So I think more dimensions, basically, Rhoda, like having the ability to see those things and essentially being able to come up with an amalgam of more than enough to be able to kind of force that no particular dimension is canonical, that nothing is right or wrong, but this is more or less like this or that, and I think
right. But I'd like to rewind. Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I'd like to rewind. If you can hear me, let me know. If there's a problem with the Wi-Fi, let me know.
No,
thanks. Going back to what you said about I have to be my own rule keeper, right? I heard that along a different set of dimensions. Okay. Which I think is just as interesting, and that is you can do X when your attention is there. When it's not, you can play a video game, right? And Frodo, you were going along those lines as well, right? And I mean, oh my God, I live in that world. I was just thinking about that when Frodo, you responded after I posted that thing about, hey, are you guys aware of this VR text tool? And you're like, you realized that he spoke last week, and I was like, no, I had no idea, right? If I had control of my attention, if I wasn't so, scattered, that would be a kind of thing in a perfect world I would know, right? And I think a lot of our systems are built around this idea that we can apply attention. What is it? We can distribute our attention evenly, and very few tools, and hopefully the next, evolution will account for. In fact, this is another sort of set of principles I've been writing as it applies to personal knowledge management. Unstable environments versus stable environments. And an unstable environment is in two ways that are defined as sinkholes, meaning SYNC sinkhole, and fault lines or my fault lines, right? And one of them is like the tech hurdles, the idea that you may find that what I have a lot of times that I move from one tool to another is because I've done something or it has done something where it just stops syncing, or I've lost some information, or there's a silent sinkhole and I don't even realize it. That's a tech example. But a fault line example could be like rules that my bosses or someone upstream or a tool has put on me that is so different from my heuristics that I either don't attend to it properly or I do it inaccurately or sporadically, right? And these are just two examples that lead to, I think, vastly different outcomes in well-intended tools. They're like it makes sense that the way to make a tool is you have to be very specific about a frame, about like your context, the problem you're trying to solve. But then at a certain point, and Slack is a perfect example, when anything gets to a kind of a scale, people start to use it in different ways than it's intended, and it becomes oftentimes a disaster. A lot of people I know of prefer email to Slack for that reason, right? In its original bound, constrained domain of like a small team working together, Slack is great. You put it in the enterprise, it's still great by my estimation, but it has a lot of problems. That's just one example, but mainly getting back to it, keeping my own rules is a really a great coordination point. Because whereas I don't use Apple Watch, I use TickTick with this thing called Habits that reminds me daily to do like 30 push-ups or something, right? And there will be times where I'm on a streak and I've done them like 2 weeks nonstop, you know? And there'll be times where I don't touch any of the habits for like a month, or, you know, but they're there. Scaffolding's there. It's not insistent. I appreciate it because otherwise I'll forget about it. So yeah, I just bring that up because that's the whole mess of topics that I think are related.
Yeah, I'm just fantasizing a bit based on this. And this whole rule thing, somebody else keeping rules for you is really fascinating, because rules can also be termed affordances, right? It is the stuff which you can and cannot do in a digital environment. So just as a fantasy, I put it in the text here as well. I could imagine, you know, like especially in a VR environment, this wall is for that wall is for that. You can do these things here. It's quite set for you, but at any point you can snap your fingers, go outside like you're in the Matrix and reset everything. But at least you have the limitations which allow you to do stuff already there. I think that'll be a very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why Rome got so popular early on, totally outside of its other inventions. It got popular because it said, the minute you open this app, we're going to give you probably a blank page, but it's going to start on the day that we're at, because this is the rule of how you use this tool. And people loved it.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that, please, from your perspective?
Absolutely. As opposed to Apple Notes or a lot of the other tools that are out there that may open up on the last page you were on or something along those lines, this said, the rule is every day is new and you are bound to the day that you're in. So we're going to, you can jump out of that. You can add a template or a set of reminders or anything to your day if you want. But a lot of people said early on just the relief that they open the app and boom, here's this blank page and it says today's date, and that's where they're at. And they know that in a way, anything that they put in there has already been encoded with one bit of metadata at least.
This is really interesting, Alan, because I had one user a couple of months ago, new guy, probably young, who said, author's the worst piece of software I've ever seen. I open it and there's nothing there. There's no template chooser or anything. So the guy didn't know to go up into the menu and click new or do Command F. And that's absolutely fine, being a new user in this world. So that was an extreme case of that person being a bit silly, but what you're saying, I guess.
No, I think it's a very valid point.
Yeah. So, but also I really, really hate in Pages and so on, having to choose a template. I'm just going to write stuff. Why would I have to choose ahead of time what it looks like? But that notion of being, of when you make a new thing or you enter a thing, of having some sense of achievement, some sense of context being provided for you. This is very, very interesting. Thank you for highlighting that.
Actually, I love what you're saying about the template. It's fun. It's really interesting to go like, well, why should you like what are the circumstances under which you would have the ability to like and select the template halfway through writing it? You know, I think that's a really interesting thing as well. I mean, it's kind of, it looks like you're writing a letter, but the reality is that Clippy never went away. They just took the face off it. uh, and it's seems to be very effective, and the that team is bigger and happier than ever to work on those things. But like, I love the idea of like just start writing, and then maybe we'll come up with what a template is, in the same way that user registration for like being able to fill a shopping cart before sign in is an essential part of shopping, because you don't know what it is you're going to do on a site before you'd enter the details. Like having the idea of being able to fluidly fill out parts of that relationship at such time as it is appropriate to do so. And so like writing a bunch of content and then being able to evaluate the practical consequence of putting it in this template or that, I just think it's really, really appealing, really interesting. To go like
100%, Brown. That is there. It could even sort of be explained just shy of scientifically, right? Like you open up an app to do a thing, to have a job to be done, right? And in the case of Roam and such, and most of these tools, it's to get something down. You get something out of your head. And so there should be as few steps as possible to do that. And then the template, which I think the programmatic deterministic programmer mindset, the engineering culture says, I need to define models and types before I go in and do the thing. The humanistic approach is the exact opposite. I need to get the thing out, and then I can start to
figure out what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Search actually is absolutely missing those concepts, and that's why it's still, I feel like, a decade out of date. Like search could, anyway, there should be a way to template things for even a search kind of experience later. But
yeah, so an interesting thing is, in some cameras, there's a pre-record function. So when you click the shutter button, it actually starts recording into disk from 5 seconds earlier, or whatever it might have been. So you didn't miss anything, right? We've often talked in this community about augmenting our Zoom dialogue. And when a few things come up really interestingly like this, I would love to say, or even click a button and say, this is interesting. It goes back 5-10 seconds, whatever, gives me the text plus the reference to where it would be in the YouTube, and I put it on my journal. That's the first step of putting it down. But then also, I'm still in love with the idea of documents, because documents in this sense don't change. So let's say we have our journal, of course, as a community, but we also have, every time we have these meetings, I put the chat log online. So that's also a record of an aspect of our meeting. So when we talk about this kind of game thing of the system keeping rules for you, which is really a very powerful earworm in my head right now, thanks to this conversation, I want to be able to refer to what we've been talking about today, which I happen to note down started roughly an hour and 38 minutes into our discussion. But what would be the elegant ways where in a few months we want to go back to this, or let's say even in a few weeks, we're getting ready for the future of text. We want to be able to say, on this day, we discussed this aspect, which we're now presenting like this. What is the mechanism which we can even cite it or refer to it? What should we do?
Just to throw a brainstorm out there, this is where I would think it's very difficult to think about how to do that unless you have a kind of minute taker or oracle of sorts. And in that case, there would be a person, at least, if not, I mean, everybody in on it, but one person assigned to try and get the ideas down, at least in the quickest form possible, into like a Miro board that is the default screen. So we default to a whiteboard and we're all writing out ideas, and then we're like sticking them and attaching them to other areas there. So you get a shape rather than a linear transcription, which can then be enhanced by the transcription or whatever. That's one top of mind.
Yeah, there is one other magical thing though, and that is time, because meetings usually start at a specific time. We are lucky. It's always between this and that 2-hour thing, right? So when I happen to write down here, roughly 138 minutes. Isn't there an easy way, a computational way, that when I then later upload to YouTube, I can link to that time?
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you right click in a YouTube video, you can copy time at current URL.
Yeah, but that requires
copy.
that requires efforts, right? I mean, editorializing and so on, excuse me, and writing up can be done quite elegantly. But imagine, you know, there are other communities like this, of course, many, many, many. So imagine if we had a way where we give author, which is what I have for my journal, the link to our channel. And if there is a video that in the title or whatever has that date, then based on that, the way that I write 1 hour 38, maybe I write it in a bracket or whatever thing, it automatically knows what to do with it. Or would that be too involved geeky?
No, that's trivial. So if you have an approximate time code that you've written down and you know from the start of recording, then you know the time code offset thing in YouTube is just t equals, and then the offset is whatever number in seconds. So if you know that it's 1 hour 38, then that's 3,600 plus 1,800 plus 480, whatever that is. And so like 5,040 or something like that. And so if you work that out, then if you actually commit to having time codes, then you should be able to pull it to that particular point.
I think the question is, does that solve the problem of retention? It does it in the instance where you say, okay, I know that this is the time when this happened, but then it's still will oftentimes mean you have to, what I have to do is like rewind and like search around. Oh, when, even though this is what I had, this is when the topic happened. So it's better than watching the whole thing over. I still have to kind of like jump around in the 10 minutes prior to get at the particular thing from that anchor. You know, someone mentioned a book that I forgot. So if retention were really the goal, like the actual encoding of the ideas, the only way to do that would be create a rule where we transcribe that as inaccurately and lazily as, but in real time while we're talking, is what I think.
Yeah, but how about this? We make, God almighty, these kids, right.
Sounds like they're having a nice time.
Yeah, they are a bit too much almost. Right. So imagine this. We make a Mac. Alan, you're a Mac user too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we make a Mac application that we talked about it kind of many times, and I think we should just do it. It records locally, everything locally. And it has a few useful things. One, of course, is the speech to text thing. But also in the toolbar on top, there is when you click on it, it just marks that as being interesting. You can choose to do further, but it just marks that as being interesting. And then when you're done, if you then also upload to YouTube, because we have the video and all of that good stuff, if there is an easy way to synchronize these two, which is not impossible because they both have audio and they both have that, this thing is being recorded and so on, then we should be able to use our local app to automatically generate the timecode links to the YouTube. So that could be an incredibly efficient way to put it into a word processing document, an email, or whatever, because we'll have the little bit of automatically transcribed text plus a link. Should we try to write that up as a spec together, and then I'll try to farm it out, see if someone, unfortunately, in Russia would do it? Because even though they're
I think we could take a step before doing that. I think the step that we would take, this is the first step. Then we refine that a little bit more, and we see if there aren't band-aids, stopgap measures, the things that are closer at hand that can get us almost there. So we try that out. There are ways, I think, that some of that could be jury rigged without much development time.
Yeah, I think that, yes, I think you and I right now are kind of representing opposite side. You're representing the engineering of it, and I'm representing a very, very lazy user. So I think that the actual usability or the lack of interactions necessary is what needs to be figured out even more than the connecting of the data. So that's why I think we should try to get it built really, really cheaply, so that we can see, is it actually useful? Like when I went through the journal feature of author, I had all these fancy features in mind. And at the end, the only thing that I have is Command J to open the journal, nothing else special. So I'm wondering, for something like this, what would be nice demo stuff and what would be nice useful stuff probably comes down to just using it a lot.
I'm wondering if
Yeah.
if we all downloaded Raycast, something along those lines. Raycast is sort of like an Alfred or a Finder bar, but it has much more customizability to launch functions, kind of like shortcuts in Apple, right? Maybe shortcuts actually would be the way to handle it, to at least
What's it called?
do
Ray?
some of that. Raycast is one.
Do you have a link? Or is it Recast? Rearray?
It's Raycast, probably .io. But shortcuts is probably now across all OSs and Mac, right? Shortcuts has always given me some trouble, but
yeah, shortcuts is a really interesting idea that Apple bought and it obviously interested in and committed to, but I don't know if there's been the full attention that it needs on the integration story.
mm-hmm.
I think you're making a lot of sense here. Yeah, Raycast, it doesn't have a full site yet.
Let me make sure I'm going to the right spot. No, this is not the right website. Pardon. I'll just open Raycast because I have it open, and it even honestly, as research, Sir Hegland, it would be a good thing to do because their onboarding experience is sublime. The way that they walk you through the concepts is fantastic. It is a very sophisticated. I mean, it's evolved quite a bit. Has a great community about it. So I'll send you their Twitter so you can get some sense of their scope, their size and whatnot. And then from there, you'll obviously see the way to download it. So Raycast app is probably the site. Oh, it's raycast.com even.
Yeah, gorgeous site.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous site, and their onboarding is wonderful. Along the lines of here's how these things work, but here's steps you can take. It feels like it's that kind of tool that I really admire, in that it seeks not to be an app to take all of your attention, but to help you link between apps. So, Frode, if you could do this for me, write out your framing of what you'd like to see, the most ideal, and then I can at the very least break it into parts and see what can be accomplished easily versus whatever. But just put it into words, because I was actually multitasking for a minute.
This looks like a supercharged liquid. Very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, speech is not text. And as we do different levels of transcript, that comes up again and again. And that's why I started this sentence on purpose so jerkily with and all of that stuff. So something like this would be very, very useful. But also when you read something, how often do we actually go back to check the original audio? Even if there's a link. Links are actually really heavy. Clicking on a link takes a lot of effort because there's the expectation you leave where you are, open the browser, wait for a download thing, queue up, and then play, right? So I think we should definitely work on something like this, but we should try to find the sweet spot of how it actually augments finding that moment and using it. I don't think it's necessarily straightforward, which is not a problem. It's just part of the discussion, right? And we're way out of time for today, but maybe we can think about this a little bit in the back of our minds.
Similarly, I'd like to put forward, if anybody has continued thoughts about a game / article / transcription experience. I'm gonna have, well, I've got to figure out the honeymoon, but I'm gonna have some time off of work, and I want to actually build something. I'd love to work on something like that, perhaps.
Talk a bit more about what you mean, please.
Well, say for instance, this conversation that we've had for the last 2 hours, 2+ hours, whatnot, I think could be displayed visually, but also in a novel visual way that reads like an article, but could be tinkered with like Minecraft, not exactly like Minecraft, but like spelinked, where you're kind of jumping around. And it would be, in my mind, it would be something that would be on the web, pretty easy to put the building blocks together. So maybe something MDX like, where you kind of say like, here's this comment that Brandel made, and here's the things that it linked to, but Brandel also adds in later on, here's some more thoughts he's had, and those are off on an x-axis, while the central column of the conversation is jumping around on a kind of a y-axis. But this Spelinker character, or not, can move around in that space. It's a pretty big. I'm not suggesting going out and building it, but I would love more ideas around if there's some intrigue in that approach. Treating an article as if it were like a video game, in order to explore different ways of reading and writing. And my intuition says that there is a new experience that we've been having that is in between reading and writing, and it doesn't have a name.
Don, I'm in a meeting. Please be quiet, okay? Oh boy, lots of energy, a bit too much sometimes.
I was just saying, my intuition is that there's a new experience that we've all been encountering that is somewhere in between reading and writing. The closest thing we have to it is called active reading, but I don't think that's sufficient. And so like a playground for exploring this perhaps new inactiveness that we're doing with our words and writing would be, I'd love to see it.
That's very interesting. And just to put some sugar on the side of that, I'm very hung up on the whole defined concepts at the moment, moving that and connecting and that kind of stuff. So going more to what you're saying here is, first of all, I'd like to see a transcript presented nicely of a conversation and having that as the basic for what you're talking about. Because the first thing you need to do in a transcript, from my experience of the transcripts we've had for the presentations, is delete a lot of stuff if you're going to make it. So to make that a more engaging activity, to clean it up like you're polishing something rather than you are select, delete, I very much think it fits for the whole game aspect, not gamification, but game interaction aspect, absolutely. And similarly, to retain access at every moment to something spoken, so that while you're reading, you can just click on something and it'll give you that audio. But even in a PDF as a static thing would be really interesting. So you don't have to load anything external. But
Last idea, this is an idea I've had for sitting on for 7 years now. It goes back to the templates being named after the fact. In the case of so the need that you have there is something that is actually readable, right? Transcript that's readable, so that requires deleting, it requires polish. I'd argue that it's that what you're working on there is a presentation layer, and deleting is not actually as necessary as pushing back. And what would be more interesting, or what I would still want to see, is defining after the fact the template, meaning defining after the fact the presentation layer. So if I want transcript mode, I could see it that way. If I want slideshow, I could see it that way. If I want it in the form of an audiobook or a podcast, eventually I feel like mediums will be presentation layers that are very cheaply constructed, assuming that metadata is bolstered and scaffolding the source material the right way. You may never even see the source material because it is being used to generate a multiplicity or a plurality of mediums, you know,
Yeah.
some of which may be interactive, right? But that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, that was my first thought when you were talking about deleting. I agree that there are a lot of things that need to be accessed from a specific view, but you know, one of the challenges that I find in digital content creation tools is this insistence that you know you lose or you need to lose things, and just because they aren't relevant in a given moment or view. And I really like the principle of perpetual non-destructive editing, having the ability to retain those things, but keep them off. And like Alan says, like that, it becomes implicitly the construction of a particular point of view. And I suspect, well, it's my hope that if you have the ability to do editing in that non-destructive way, carrying around all of the characteristics of what the original corpus is, then it might make it easier for an application or certainly users to be able to see the process of producing anything from an initial corpus as sort of a consistently repeatable act, like you say, that then artificial intelligence in whatever form it sort of manifests itself should be able to kind of support, and to be able to repeat over a different corpus based on assessments of similarity of this sort of set of truths and sources to that.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, there will be the underlying audio or video truth, so to speak. So, but even I do prefer Alan's phrase of pushing back or folding away or hiding rather than delete. Delete is a bit of a shorthand. So I think, yeah. But it just bothers me in our community. We have a lot of crap, just talking nonsense and admin and how are you and that kind of stuff and personal stuff. Of course we do, which is important. You know, we are friends. But at the same time, there is some really, really clever insights from some really, really clever people who would the wider community would benefit from. And short of what Mark Anderson and I tried to do with the monthly presentation, with the presentation and the Q&A, it doesn't go into that useful or rather findable formats. And, you know, for someone to read a transcript of our 2-hour call today would be really boring unless one of us gets super famous, right? So you know, it's good to have it for a posterity, but some of the things we talked about today, how can the tool help us do that secretarial work is what we're talking about.
This is a side note, but to come back to the pitch of doing a talk with a whiteboard and having like a person who's responsible for getting down as whatever they can, but also including everybody else, not only for the sake of transcribing what's being talked about, I think we would find that it is a different kind of it would feel substantively different and perhaps even more creative to be operating in these two modalities. You'd have to have total attention paid to hearing what people are talking about while also sort of like reading and writing together and connecting. But I think with the time that I tried it, or if I have tried it in UX settings, it is a more refined, you get more refined material writing it out than you get at times when you're talking together. It's like talking tends to be horizontal, and then writing tends to be a little bit vertical in its depth. Anyway, I still think it'd be a worthwhile experiment.
Oh, that's a really, really important point. I mean, that's partly why I've been doing the future of text for all these years. And I don't want everyone to have to write a huge document and discourse with us. And
Mhm.
this is why a year ago, I was really harping on about, can people please write something for the journal, even if it's a paragraph, even if it's uncapitalized, even if it's just notes, even if it's hardly any text, but mostly screenshots. And there was a bit of a rebelling in the group on that, because I think we have very different ideas of what writing is. And once we put writing in public, we have a very different idea, I think, of how polished it should be. If you're a true academic, that's the most horrifying thing you can do, because you expect every word to be judged by someone. If you're more casual about it, something else. But yes, if we could have more of a written discourse, properly cited, I would be very, very happy. But that's a topic for a whole different lifetime.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Look forward to Monday, to those who can make it. Bye, guys.
See you.
Awesome.
Bye.
See you, everybody.